The morning sun painted the wheat fields of New Busan in golden light. Commander Hansol Kim stood on his porch, watching the harvest machines move through the crops like gentle giants. The sight never got old. 3 years ago, this land had been nothing but rocky soil and wild grass. Now it fed over 2 million people. His coffee steamed in the cool air. Real coffee, grown in the southern valleys where the soil was rich and dark. Not the synthetic stuff they used to drink on the transport ships. Everything here was real. Everything here was home. A transport speeder hummed overhead, carrying workers to the mining stations in the northern mountains. The mines produced enough rare metals to trade with other human colonies. New Busan was becoming wealthy, slowly but surely. More importantly, it was becoming stable. Hansol smiled as he watched his daughter Mira walk between the wheat stalks. She carried a small device that tested the grain for ripeness. At 22, she knew more about farming than he knew about anything. She had been born during the journey to New Busan, in the cold metal belly of a colony ship. Now she walked on soil under an open sky, doing work that mattered. The communication device on his belt buzzed softly. Hansol looked at the screen and saw a message from his old friend Tae-min Lee. The message was simple. Defense meeting at noon. Bring coffee. Tae-min ran the colony's infrastructure. He made sure the power flowed, the water ran clean, and the communication systems worked. He also worried about things that most colonists never thought about. Things like defense. Hansol finished his coffee and walked back inside his small house. The walls were made from local stone, cut and shaped by human hands. The furniture was simple but comfortable. Pictures of Earth hung next to pictures of New Busan's first harvest. Old life and new life side by side. He put on his uniform jacket. The colony defense force was small, only 300 people. Most of them were part-time volunteers who spent their days farming or working in the factories, but they took their duty seriously. In a galaxy full of hostile aliens, every human settlement needed protection. The defense headquarters sat in the center of New Busan City. The building was low and wide, built to survive earthquakes and storms. Inside, the walls were lined with screens showing information from across the planet. Population numbers, weather reports, ship movements in orbit. Tae-min was already waiting in the conference room. He looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he had been up most of the night. Next to him sat Dr. Yuna Park, the colony's chief medical officer. Her expression was serious. "What's wrong?" Hansol asked as he sat down. Tae-min activated a holographic display above the table. It showed a map of local space, with New Busan marked as a small blue dot. Red markers showed the positions of alien military forces. "The Vorthak Dominion is moving," Tae-min said. 3 fleets have crossed into this sector in the past month. They're taking control of uninhabited systems and setting up military bases. Hansol studied the display. The red markers formed a rough circle around human space. "How close are they?" "Close enough," Dr. Yuna said. "I've been monitoring reports from other colonies. The Vorthak aren't just expanding randomly. They're targeting systems with specific resources." She pointed to several systems on the map. Rare metals for ship construction, gases for fuel production, agricultural worlds for food supplies. They're building something big. "What does Earth Command say?" Hansol asked. Tae-min's expression darkened. "Earth Command is 6 months away by the fastest ships. They're dealing with their own problems. 3 other alien species have become aggressive in the past year. Human space is under pressure from all sides. The room was quiet for a moment. Outside, life in the colony continued as normal. People worked in the fields and factories. Children played in the schools. Families shared meals together. They had no idea that alien warships were moving closer every day. "What do we know about the Vorthak?" Han Sol asked. Dr. Yuna called up new information on the display. Images of tall, gray-skinned aliens in black armor appeared. "They're a military society. Everything they do revolves around conquest and control. They see other species as either useful resources or obstacles to be removed. They've conquered 12 systems in the past 2 years," Taemin added. "Some had native populations. Some had colonies from other species. The Vorthak don't negotiate. They demand surrender or they attack." "What happened to the populations they conquered?" Han Sol asked. Dr. Yuna and Taemin exchanged glances. "Reports are unclear," she said carefully. "Some people were relocated. Some were used as forced labor. Some just disappeared from the records." Han Sol felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He had fought in the Earth Defense Forces before coming to New Busan. He knew what disappeared from the records usually meant. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Unknown," Taemin said. "Long-range sensors show Vorthak ships 3 systems away. They could be here in weeks or months, depending on their plans." "Can we defend ourselves?" Taemin called up information about New Busan's defenses. The display showed orbital defense platforms, ground-based weapons, and the locations of the Defense Force units. It looked impressive until compared to the size of a Vorthak fleet. "We can make them pay for taking us," he said. "But we can't stop them if they really want this planet." "Why would they want us?" Han Sol asked. "We're just farmers and miners." "Location," Dr. Yuna said. "New Busan sits at the intersection of 3 major trade routes. Control this system, and you can control movement through this entire sector. Plus, our mines produce high-grade materials they need for their ships." Han Sol stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see people going about their daily lives, children playing in the park, workers heading home after their shifts, families shopping in the market, all of them trusting that someone else would keep them safe. "What are our options?" he asked. "We can try to negotiate," Taemin said. "Maybe they'll accept tribute instead of conquest. Some species have survived that way." "We can evacuate," Dr. Yuna said. "Get the civilian population off-world before the Vorthak arrive." "Where would they go?" Han Sol asked. "Other colonies are facing the same threat. Earth is overcrowded and 6 months away." "We can fight," Taemin said quietly. They all knew what that meant. New Busan had 300 defenders against a fleet that could carry 50,000 soldiers. The colony had some weapons, but nothing that could seriously threaten modern warships. Fighting meant dying, probably without accomplishing anything useful. "There's a 4th option," Dr. Yuna said. "We can prepare for all 3. Set up evacuation plans for the civilians, prepare defensive positions for those who want to stay and fight, and send diplomatic messages to let them know we're open to negotiation." Han Sol nodded. It was the smart approach. Give themselves as many options as possible and hope for the best. "I'll talk to the Colony Council," he said. "We need to tell people what's happening. They deserve to know." "Should we cause a panic?" Taemin asked. "People aren't stupid," Han Sol said. "They've noticed the extra patrols and the new defensive positions. They know something is happening. Better to tell them the truth and let them prepare than to leave them in the dark." Dr. Yuna stood up. "I'll start working on evacuation plans. Medical supplies, transportation, emergency shelters, just in case. I'll reinforce our defenses, Taemin said, and start training more volunteers. Maybe we can't win a war, but we can show them that humans don't give up easily. Han Sol looked at his friends. They had come to New Busan to build something new and peaceful. Now they were preparing for war. Life had a cruel sense of humor sometimes. That evening, Han Sol walked through the colony with Mira. She had finished her work in the fields and wanted to show him the new irrigation system. The pipes carried water from the mountain springs to every farm in the valley. It had taken 2 years to build and would serve the colony for decades. "Dad, is something wrong?" Mira asked. "You've been quiet all day." Han Sol looked at his daughter. She was strong and smart and kind. She represented everything good about humanity's expansion into space. The idea of anything happening to her made his chest tight with fear and rage. "There might be some trouble coming," he said. "Nothing we can't handle, but I wanted you to know." Mira stopped walking and looked at him. "Trouble like alien ships' trouble?" "Maybe." She was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "Well, they picked the wrong colony to mess with. We've got the best defense commander in human space." Han Sol laughed despite his worries. "How do you know that?" "Because you're my dad," she said simply. "And dads always protect their families." They walked home together as the sun set behind the mountains. The colony was beautiful in the evening light, peaceful and prosperous and full of hope for the future. Han Sol hoped it would stay that way. But deep in his heart, he knew that change was coming. The only question was what form it would take. The Vorthak ships appeared in the sky like black clouds. Han Sol stood on the observation deck of the defense headquarters, watching through binoculars as the alien vessels took positions around New Busan. There were 12 of them, each one, bigger than any human ship he had ever seen. The colony's emergency sirens had been quiet for 3 hours now. After the initial panic, an eerie calm had settled over New Busan. People stayed in their homes or gathered in community centers, waiting for news. Children asked their parents why the sky looked different. Parents gave answers they hoped were true. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Officer Bo-Ram Jung from the communications station. She was young, barely out of training, but her voice stayed steady. "Put it through," Han Sol said. The main screen flickered and showed the face of a Vorthak officer. His skin was gray like old metal and his eyes were completely black. Scars covered his face in patterns that might have been decorative or might have been from battle. When he spoke, his voice was deep and cold. "I am Admiral Zephon of the Vorthak Dominion. You will identify yourself." Han Sol stepped in front of the screen. "Commander Han Sol Kim of the New Busan Defense Force. Commander Kim, I will speak simply so that your primitive mind can understand. This world now belongs to the Vorthak Dominion. You have 48 hours to evacuate all humans from the planet. Any who remain after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Admiral, we are a peaceful colony. We have no military threat to your forces. Perhaps we can reach some kind of agreement that benefits both our peoples." Admiral Zephon's expression did not change. "There is no agreement. There is only submission or destruction. You have 48 hours. The transmission ended. The control room was quiet for a long moment. Then Tai Min spoke from his station. 48 hours. That's not enough time to evacuate 2 million people." "It's not meant to be," Han Sol said. "He knows we can't move everyone in that time." Dr. Yuna looked up from her medical station. I've been monitoring their ships since they arrived. They're scanning our population centers with some kind of biological sensor. Very detailed scans. What kind of biological sensor? Han Sol asked. The kind that maps genetic structures and physiological systems, she said. Her voice was worried. Why would they need that information just to take over a planet? Before Han Sol could answer, Officer Jung spoke up again. Sir, we're getting reports from other human colonies. 3 more worlds have been contacted by Vorthak fleets in the past week. Same message. 48 hours to evacuate. Any word from those colonies? Taemin asked. 2 are trying to negotiate. 1 started evacuating immediately. Jung paused. And sir, there's something else. We intercepted some merchant ship communications. Traders have been reporting Vorthak ships capturing human vessels over the past 6 months. The ships were never seen again, but some escape pods were recovered. What did the survivors say? Han Sol asked. Jung looked uncomfortable. There weren't any survivors, sir, but the escape pods contained biological samples, human tissue and blood samples. Dr. Yuna stood up suddenly. They've been studying us. The Vorthak have been collecting human biological data for months. Why? Taemin asked. I don't know, she said, but I need to access our medical databases and run some tests. Something about this doesn't feel right. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. The Colony Council met continuously, trying to plan evacuations that everyone knew were impossible. The few civilian ships in orbit could carry maybe 50,000 people. Commercial transport would take weeks to arrive, even if they could afford. And meanwhile, Han Sol worked with his defense teams to prepare fighting positions. They had weapons caches hidden throughout the colony and emergency shelters carved into the mountains. If the Vorthak wanted New Busan, they would have to fight for every building and every street. Dr. Yuna spent the time in her laboratory analyzing data from the Vorthak ships. What she found made her sick to her stomach. She found Han Sol in the command center late that night. He was studying maps of the colony, marking defensive positions and evacuation routes. He looked older than she had ever seen him. Han Sol, we need to talk, she said. Privately, they walked to his office and closed the door. Dr. Yuna activated a privacy screen that would block any electronic listening devices. The biological scans, she said. I know what they're for. Han Sol waited. They're not just studying our genetics for scientific purposes. They're designing something specific to human biology. A weapon. What kind of weapon? Biological. Something that would only affect humans and would be extremely lethal. She paused. But Han Sol, that's not the worst part. Based on the scanning, patterns, and the data I've intercepted, this weapon isn't designed to kill quickly. What do you mean? It's designed to cause maximum pain and suffering before death. The biological processes would break down slowly over several days. The victim would remain conscious and aware throughout the entire process. Han Sol felt something cold and sharp twist in his stomach. They want to torture us to death. Not just torture, they want to study the effects. This is an experiment. We're not just losing our homes, Han Sol. We're going to be test subjects. The communication system buzzed. Admiral Zephon's face appeared on the screen again. This time he looked almost pleased. Commander Kim, I am prepared to show you mercy. You now have 24 hours to evacuate, instead of 48. This is because I am feeling generous. Admiral, we need more time. There are over 2 million people here, including children and elderly. We simply cannot move everyone in one day. That is not my concern. Any humans remaining on the planet after tomorrow will become subjects for our research projects. I believe you will find our research methods quite educational. The transmission ended again. Hansol looked at Dr. Yuna. Her face was pale, but her eyes were angry. Educational, she said quietly. He knows exactly what he's going to do to us. Can you create a defense against their biological weapon? Maybe, if I had weeks and a full research team, but not in 24 hours. Hansol called an emergency meeting of the colony's leadership. Elder Jinwoo Nam arrived despite his age, walking slowly but with determination. The colony council members came, along with Taemin and Dr. Yuna. We need to make a decision, Hansol said. Fight, flee, or surrender. We can't flee, said council member Yoonji Lee. The ships we have can't carry more than a small fraction of our people. We can't surrender, said Dr. Yuna. They're not interested in prisoners. They want test subjects. Elder Jinwoo spoke for the first time. Then we fight, but not the way they expect. What do you mean? Hansol asked. The old man's eyes were hard. They think we're weak farmers who will panic and run. They think we'll beg and surrender when we see their weapons. They don't understand humans very well. Jinwoo, Taemin said gently. We can hurt them, but we can't win. Their ships are too powerful. Win? Jinwoo laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Boy, we're not trying to win. We're trying to teach them a lesson they'll never forget. That night, families across New Busan said goodbye to each other. Those with space on evacuation ships held their children close. Those staying behind hugged their loved ones and promised to see them again someday. Hansol found Mira in the wheat fields where she had worked for years. She was sitting among the grain that would never be harvested, looking up at the alien ships. Dad, I want to stay, she said. Mira, there's a place for you on the medical transport. Dr. Yuna can take you to the orbital station. No, this is my home. These are my fields. If someone is going to fight for New Busan, it should be the people who love it most. Hansol sat down beside his daughter. Above them, the Vorthak ships moved like predators circling their prey. The night was clear and full of stars, but the alien vessels blocked out patches of the sky. Are you scared? Mira asked. Yes, Hansol said, but not of dying. I'm scared of what they'll do to people if we don't stop them here. Then we'll stop them. Mira, these aren't soldiers coming to conquer us. They're monsters coming to torture us. For science. She was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, and Hansol saw something in her expression that reminded him of her grandfather. Something hard and unforgiving. Then they picked the wrong species to experiment on, she said. Humans don't make good test subjects. We bite back. The morning came with clear skies and warm sunshine. It should have been another beautiful day on New Busan. Instead, it was the last day the colony would exist. At exactly noon, Admiral Zephon's ships began their attack. 6 months had passed since the sky burned over New Busan. Hansol sat in the underground command center, staring at reports that still made him sick to read. The emergency shelter had been designed to hold 500 people for a few weeks. Now it housed 847 survivors for half a year. The walls were lined with metal and stone, carved deep into the mountain where the Vorthak sensors could not find them. Emergency lights cast harsh shadows across the faces of people who had seen too much. Children who no longer played games. adults who spoke in whispers and jumped at sudden sounds. Taemin entered the command room carrying a data pad. His left arm was gone, lost in the first day of fighting when he had stayed behind to activate the colony's self-destruct systems. The explosion had damaged 3 Vorthak ships and bought time for people to reach the shelters. "New intelligence from the surface," he said, setting down the pad. "The hunting parties are getting bolder. They've moved into the residential districts." Hansol looked at the surveillance footage. Vorthak soldiers moved through the ruins of New Busan City, not like conquerors securing territory, but like hunters, tracking prey. They kicked down doors and searched through buildings looking for any humans who might still be hiding. But they were not just looking. They were playing. The Vorthak had learned that some humans had survived their biological weapon attack. Instead of finishing the job quickly, they had turned it into entertainment. Small groups of soldiers would hunt for survivors, capture them, and bring them back to research facilities for slow, careful torture. Dr. Yuna appeared on the screen from the medical bay. She looked tired and older, her hair now showing gray streaks that had not been there before the attack. In her hands were medical reports and biological samples. "I finished analyzing the agent they used," she said. "It's worse than I thought." "How can it be worse?" Hansol asked. "We watched our people die in agony for days." "Because it was designed that way. Every aspect of the weapon was created to cause maximum psychological trauma to the victims and to anyone watching them die." She paused. "Hansol, this wasn't just a biological weapon. It was a torture device that happened to be biological." Taemin leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "The agent doesn't just attack the nervous system randomly. It targets specific nerve pathways that control pain perception while leaving consciousness intact. The victims feel everything, but they can't lose consciousness or go into shock. They remain aware throughout the entire process." Hansol felt the familiar rage building in his chest. Over the past 6 months, that rage had become his constant companion. It kept him awake at night and drove him through each day. "There's more," Dr. Yuna continued. "I've been monitoring Vorthak communications. New Busan was a test site. They're planning to use refined versions of this weapon on Earth and 12 major human colonies. They call it Project Final Education." The command room was silent. Outside, the ventilation system hummed quietly, cycling air through filters that scrubbed away any trace of human scent. Above them, alien soldiers walked through the graveyard of their home. "How many people did they kill with their test?" Taemin asked, quietly. 2,300,057, Hansol said. He had memorized the exact number. Every single person who had lived and died on New Busan. Every single person who had trusted him to keep them safe. "And they call it education," Dr. Yuna said. "In their communications, they refer to the human deaths as valuable learning experiences and successful data collection events." Hansol stood up and walked to the wall where pictures of the dead were displayed. Faces of friends and neighbors and family members. Mira's picture was in the center, taken just a week before the attack. She was smiling, holding a sheaf of wheat from her fields. She had died on the 3rd day, along with most of the people who had stayed to fight. The biological weapon had not cared about courage or determination. It had simply done what it was designed to do, cause suffering for as long as possible. "What about the other human colonies?" Hansol asked. "Do they know what's coming?" "I've sent warnings through emergency channels," Taemin said. "But the Vorthak are jamming most communications. Some messages might get through, but probably not many. And Earth Command? Still 6 months away, even if they left immediately. And they're dealing with attacks from other alien species. They might not be able to help anyone. Hansol turned back to his friends. In the harsh light of the emergency shelter, they looked like ghosts. All of them did. The survivors of New Busan had become something that was no longer quite human and not yet dead. "We need to make contact with the outside," he said. "Find a way to warn other colonies and get word to Earth." "How?" Taemin asked. "The Vorthak control all communications on and off the planet." "There's a merchant ship," Dr. Yuna said. "Captain Dong Ho Seo. His ship, the Soul's Pride, has been making supply runs to Outer Rim colonies. He's scheduled to arrive in this system next week." "The Vorthak will stop him," Taemin said. "Not if he looks like he's just passing through. Dong Ho is smart. He'll scan the system and see the Vorthak ships. If we can get a message to him without the Vorthak noticing." Hansol nodded. "What kind of message?" Dr. Yuna smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "A complete record of what the Vorthak did here. Video footage, biological analysis, intercepted communications, everything." "And then what? Even if he gets the message to other colonies, what can they do? The Vorthak have superior weapons and numbers. They can prepare," she said. "More importantly, they can make sure the galaxy knows what happened here." Hansol understood. It was not about stopping the Vorthak, at least not immediately. It was about making sure that when humanity finally struck back, they would know exactly what they were striking back for. The week passed slowly. The survivors worked in shifts, monitoring Vorthak communications and preparing data packages for transmission. They organized everything: medical records of the victims, video footage of the attacks, analysis of the biological weapons, and intercepted Vorthak military communications. But Hansol found himself thinking about more than just warning other colonies. He studied the Vorthak patrol patterns and military procedures. He learned their language and their customs. He memorized the names and faces of every officer involved in the New Busan operation. On the day the Soul's Pride was scheduled to arrive, Hansol gathered the survivors in the main shelter area. 847 people looked back at him. Children who had aged years in months, adults who had learned to sleep with weapons in their hands, elderly people who had buried their entire families. "We have a chance to get word out about what happened here," he said, "to warn other human colonies and tell Earth Command what the Vorthak are planning." "Will it save anyone?" asked Mi-young Park, a teacher who had lost her entire school to the biological weapon. "Maybe. Probably not everyone. But it will make sure that the galaxy knows what the Vorthak did to us." "And then what?" asked Jun-Ho Kim, a miner who had lost his wife and 3 children. "We hide in these caves until we..." Hansol looked at the faces around him. These people had trusted him to protect them, and he had failed. Their families were dead because he had not been strong enough or smart enough or ruthless enough to stop the Vorthak. But he could still do one thing for them. "No," he said. "Then we make sure that every single Vorthak who participated in the murder of New Busan pays for what they did." The room was quiet. Then Elder Jin-woo spoke from his chair near the back. At 80 years old, he was the oldest survivor, and his voice carried weight. "How?" he asked. Hansol had been thinking about that question for 6 months. "We learn everything we can about them. Their biology, their psychology, their culture, their fears. We find out what hurts them and how to hurt them most effectively. And then we go hunting. Dr. Yuna looked troubled. Han Sol, there are less than 900 of us. The Vorthak have millions of soldiers. We don't need to fight their entire military, he said. We just need to find the ones responsible for New Busan, Admiral Zephon and his officers, the scientists who designed the biological weapon, the politicians who approved the operation. That's assassination, not warfare, Tae-min said. Good, because what they did to our families wasn't warfare either. It was torture and murder disguised as conquest. The Soul's Pride appeared on schedule, broadcasting standard merchant identification codes. The Vorthak ships challenged the vessel, but Captain Dong-ho provided proper documentation and kept his course steady. To the aliens, he looked like just another human trader trying to make a living in a dangerous galaxy. But Han Sol had worked with Dong-ho before. The captain was former military, and he knew how to read a situation. When his ship's sensors detected the biological residue of mass death on New Busan's surface, he understood what had happened. The data transmission lasted less than 3 seconds. A tight beam message from the mountain shelter to the Soul's Pride, containing everything the survivors had learned about the Vorthak operation. Video evidence, biological analysis, military intelligence, and a personal message from Han Sol to Earth Command. Captain Dong-ho received the transmission and immediately began preparing for emergency jump to hyperspace. But first, he sent a reply. Message received and understood. Will deliver to Earth Command and all human colonies. Whatever you're planning, you're not alone. Humanity remembers its children. The Soul's Pride vanished into hyperspace, carrying the truth about New Busan to the rest of human space. That night, Han Sol stood guard on the surface for the first time in months. The ruins of the colony stretched out below him, visible in the light of New Busan's twin moons. Somewhere in the darkness, Vorthak soldiers continued their hunt for human survivors. But now the survivors were going to start hunting back. 1 year had passed since the survivors left New Busan. Han Sol stood in the cargo bay of the Soul's Pride, watching his people prepare for another hunt. They no longer looked like farmers or miners or teachers. They looked like something else entirely. Captain Dong-ho had kept his word. The Soul's Pride had become a mobile base for the survivors, traveling between star systems and carrying out missions that no official military force would approve. Dong-ho had lost his own family to alien raiders years ago. He understood the need for justice that went beyond law. Dr. Yuna worked at a portable laboratory in the corner of the cargo bay. She had perfected her biological weapon, the one that affected only Vorthak physiology, but she used it sparingly. Most of their targets died by more personal methods. Target confirmed, said Tae-min from his computer station. His prosthetic arm moved smoothly as he typed, a reminder of what they had lost and why they fought. Commander Vexhai, second in command during the New Busan operation. Currently stationed on the mining world Kethvar. Han Sol studied the intelligence report. Commander Vexhai had been the officer responsible for deploying the biological weapon. He had personally supervised the torture of captured civilians, documenting their deaths for scientific analysis. Security? Han Sol asked. Light. Kethvar is considered a safe posting. Vexhai has a small guard unit and thinks he's beyond human. Reach. He's wrong. The team that would carry out the mission gathered around the tactical display. Only 6 people, but they had become devastatingly effective. Mi Young Park, the former teacher, was now an expert in Vorthak psychology and interrogation techniques. Junho Kim, the miner, had learned to move through alien facilities like a ghost. "How do we get onto the planet?" asked So-Ra Lee, a young woman who had lost her parents in the biological attack. She was barely 25, but had become their best infiltration specialist. "Supply ship," Dong-Ho said. "I've got forged credentials that show the Soul's pride as a legitimate cargo hauler. We can get into the system without triggering alerts. And once we're on the surface, Vex High likes to visit the civilian entertainment district," Mi Young said. "He has particular tastes in recreation that make him predictable." Han Sol nodded. They had learned to study their targets completely before moving. Vorthak military. Officers were trained to be careful, but they all had weaknesses, personal habits that could be exploited. The Soul's pride jumped to hyperspace, beginning the 3-day journey to Kethvar. During the trip, the team prepared their equipment and reviewed their intelligence. Every detail mattered. They could not afford mistakes, but Han Sol found himself thinking about more than just the current mission. Over the past year, they had eliminated 17 Vorthak officers involved in the new Busan operation. Each death had been carefully planned to send a message. The first few targets had died quickly, killed by conventional weapons or Dr. Yuna's biological agent. But as the survivors learned more about Vorthak culture, their methods became more sophisticated. Vorthak society was built around concepts of honor and strength. Warriors who died in battle were celebrated, but warriors who died in shameful ways brought disgrace to their entire family lines. The survivors had learned to kill their targets in ways that violated every Vorthak cultural taboo. Bodies found arranged in ritualistic positions that mocked Vorthak religious beliefs. Deaths that appeared to be the result of cowardice or weakness. Public humiliations that destroyed reputations even after death. The psychological impact on the Vorthak military had been significant. Officers who had participated in the new Busan operation now requested transfers to distant sectors. Some had retired early. A few had suffered nervous breakdowns. "Sir," said Sora from her workstation, "we're getting reports from other human colonies. 3 more systems have been attacked by Vorthak forces using the biological weapon." Han Sol felt the familiar rage building in his chest. "How many dead?" "Preliminary reports suggest over 5 million casualties across the 3 worlds." The IZ cargo bay was silent. 5 million people tortured to death the same way their families had died. 5 million people who might have lived if the survivors had worked faster, killed more efficiently, spread more fear among the Vorthak command structure. "Any survivors?" Dr. Yuna asked quietly. "Unknown. Communications with all 3 systems have been cut off." Han Sol walked to the viewing port and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human colonies were dying in agony while he hunted individual Vorthak officers. The mathematics were brutal. Even if they killed 100 officers a year, it would not be enough to stop the larger genocide. "We need to change our approach," he said. "What do you mean?" Taemin asked. "We're thinking too small. Individual assassinations aren't stopping the larger operation. We need to target the entire command structure." "How?" Mi Young asked. "We find Admiral Zephon." The team looked at each other. Admiral Zephon was the supreme commander of the biological weapons program. He was also one of the most heavily protected officers in the Vorthak military. Han Sol. Dr. Yuna said carefully, "Zephon commands an entire fleet. He's surrounded by thousands of soldiers and dozens of warships. Getting close to him would be suicide. Maybe. But think about the impact. Zephon is a hero to the Vorthok. He's the architect of their expansion program. If he dies in the right way, it could cripple their entire biological weapons initiative. Captain Dong Ho entered the cargo bay carrying a data pad. We've got new intelligence from Earth Command. Thought you'd want to see this. Han Sol took the pad and read the report. His expression grew darker with each line. What is it? Tae-min asked. Earth Command has officially designated our operations as unauthorized vigilante actions. They're ordering all human civilians to avoid contact with us and refusing to provide any support or intelligence. Why? Sora asked. Because what we're doing isn't warfare. It's terrorism. At least that's how they see it. Junho laughed bitterly. Terrorism. What do they call what the Vorthak did to our families? An act of war, Han Sol said, which means it falls under military jurisdiction and diplomatic protocols. And our response falls under criminal law. We're not soldiers fighting an enemy. We're civilians committing murder. Dr. Yuna set down her laboratory equipment. Do you want to stop? Han Sol looked at his team. These people had lost everything and rebuilt themselves into instruments of vengeance. They had given up any chance of normal lives to hunt the creatures that had tortured their families to death. No, he said. But we need to understand that we're alone now. Earth Command won't help us. Other colonies won't shelter us. If we're caught, no one will defend us. We were alone from the beginning, Mi-young said. The only difference now is that it's official. The Soul's Pride dropped out of hyperspace near Kethvar. The planet appeared on their screens as a brown and gray world covered with mining installations. Thousands of ships moved between the surface and orbital facilities, carrying precious metals and rare elements. Vorthak Customs Control is hailing us, Dong Ho said from the bridge. Answer them, Han Sol said. We're just another cargo hauler looking for work. The inspection went smoothly. The Vorthak customs officers were more interested in potential contraband than in the ship's passengers. Within 2 hours, the Soul's Pride was cleared to dock at the main orbital station. Team Alpha will take the shuttle to the surface, Han Sol said. Team Beta stays with the ship in case we need emergency extraction. The shuttle ride to Kethvar's surface was tense but uneventful. Vorthak security was focused on preventing theft of mining equipment, not on hunting human assassins. The survivors had learned to move through alien societies without attracting attention. Commander Vexhi's routine was exactly as their intelligence had predicted. Every evening, he left the military compound and visited an entertainment district where Vorthak officers could indulge in various recreational activities. He always took the same route and always traveled with the same small security detail. The team positioned themselves along Vexhi's route 3 hours before he was scheduled to appear. Sora and Junho took positions near the entertainment district. Mi-young and Han Sol waited near the military compound. If their primary plan failed, they had backup positions throughout the city. At exactly 1900 local time, Commander Vexhi left the military compound with 4 guards. He looked confident and relaxed, like an officer who had never considered that. His enemies might hunt him across interstellar space. That confidence lasted until he reached the alley where Junho waited. The attack was swift and silent. Junho disabled the guards with a paralytic gas that Dr. Yuna had developed. Commander Vexhi found himself alone and helpless in the middle of an alien city, facing humans who had traveled across the galaxy to find him. Commander Vexhi, Han Sol said in perfect Vorthak as he stepped out of the shadows. We need to talk. 3 hours later, they found Vexhi's body arranged in a position that violated every principle of Vorthak military honor. The guards were left alive but unconscious, with messages carved into their armor. New Busan remembers. By the time Vorthak security forces responded to the scene, the Soul's Pride was already in hyperspace, carrying its deadly passengers to their next target. In his private quarters, Han Sol studied intelligence reports on Admiral Zephon's current location. The Vorthak Supreme Commander was preparing for another biological weapons test on a human colony called Haven's Rest. 2 million people lived on Haven's Rest. Men, women, and children who had built farms and homes and schools, just like the people of New Busan. Han Sol activated his communication system and sent a message to Dr. Yuna. "Prepare everything we have, we're going after Zephon." It was time to teach the Vorthak that some lessons came with a price they could never afford to pay. The transmission reached Earth Command at exactly 0800 Greenwich Standard Time. Admiral Sarah Chen was drinking her morning coffee when her aide rushed into her office with a data pad that would change everything. "Ma'am, you need to see this. Immediately," Lieutenant Torres said. "It's from the New Busan survivors." Admiral Chen had been trying to ignore the New Busan problem for months. A group of civilian survivors had gone rogue, carrying out unauthorized attacks against Vorthak's forces. Earth Command had officially disavowed their actions, but privately, many officers admired their results. The transmission was simple: video footage of Admiral Zephon's death. The Vorthak Supreme Commander hung upside down from a power transmission, tower on Haven's Rest, his body arranged in the most shameful position possible in Vorthak culture. Around his neck was a sign written in multiple languages. "This is what happens to those who torture children for science." But the video showed more than just Zephon's death. It showed the biological weapons laboratory that Han Sol's team had destroyed. It showed the research data they had stolen. It showed evidence of planned attacks on Earth itself. "How many people know about this?" Admiral Chen asked. "It's been broadcast simultaneously to every human colony, every news network, and every military command. The New Busan survivors sent it everywhere at once." Admiral Chen watched the video again. In the background, she could see Han Sol Kim standing next to Zephon's body. The former colony commander looked directly into the camera and spoke in a voice that was calm and cold. "This message is for anyone who thinks humans make good victims," he said. "We don't. What you do to us, we will do to you. What you take from us, we will take from you with interest. Admiral Zephon learned this lesson. Others can learn it the easy way or the hard way." The transmission ended with a complete intelligence. "Report on Vorthak military operations, including planned biological attacks on 17 human worlds." The information was detailed, accurate, and obviously obtained through methods that Earth Command could never officially approve. Admiral Chen's communication system buzzed. The Secretary of Defense was calling an emergency meeting. 2 hours later, Admiral Chen sat in a secure conference room with the highest-ranking military and civilian officials in human space. The mood was grim, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Pride, maybe, or hunger. "The political situation has changed," said Secretary Williams. 3 major news networks are calling the New Busan survivors heroes. Public opinion polls show 80% support for their actions. "What about the other 20%? Asked General Morrison. "They think the survivors aren't going far enough." Admiral Chen pulled up casualty reports on her screen. "We've confirmed biological weapon attacks on 6 human colonies in the past year. Total casualties exceed 12 million people. The Vorthak are using refined versions of the weapon they tested on New Busan. How many colonies do they plan to attack?" Secretary Williams asked. According to the intelligence from Han Sol's team, 43 worlds are on their target list, including Earth. The room was silent. 43 worlds represented over 200 million human lives. Men, women, and children who would die in agony if the Vorthak biological weapons program continued. What about our own military response? General Morrison asked. Our fleets are engaged across multiple sectors. The Vorthak aren't the only species. That's become aggressive. We're fighting on 7 fronts and losing ground on most of them. So we can't protect our own colonies? Not all of them. We can probably defend Earth and the core worlds, but the outer rim colonies are on their own. Secretary Williams looked at the intelligence reports again. What about the New Busan survivors? How effective have they been? Admiral Chen had been studying their operations for months. The results were impressive and terrifying. They've eliminated over 60 Vorthak officers involved in biological weapons operations. They've destroyed 3 research facilities and stolen enough intelligence to fill our databases for years. Most importantly, they've created panic in the Vorthak command structure. How so? Vorthak military culture is based on honor and strength. The survivors kill their targets in ways that bring shame to their families and clans. Some Vorthak officers are requesting transfers away from biological weapons programs. Others are retiring early. General Morrison leaned forward. Are you suggesting we officially support vigilante operations? I'm suggesting we stop calling them vigilantes and start calling them what they really are. An independent military unit operating in humanity's interest. That's a dangerous precedent, Secretary Williams said. Sir, with respect, we're facing genocide. Normal precedents don't apply. The meeting lasted 4 hours. When it ended, humanity had a new military doctrine. Any individual or group acting to prevent the extermination of human populations would receive covert support from Earth Command. Officially, such groups did not exist. Unofficially, they would have access to intelligence, equipment, and safe harbor. The new doctrine had a simple name: Retribution Authority. Meanwhile, the soul's pride drifted in empty space between star systems. Han Sol stood in the observation lounge, watching the stars and thinking about what they had accomplished on Haven's Rest. They had arrived too late to prevent the biological attack entirely. The Vorthak had already deployed their weapon against 3 cities, killing nearly 500,000 people. But Han Sol's team had destroyed the research facility and eliminated the entire scientific staff before they could refine the weapon further. Admiral Zephon's death had been personal. Han Sol had looked into the alien's black eyes and told him exactly why he was going to die. He had described every person who had died on New Busan, starting with Mira. He had made sure Zephon understood that his death was payment for specific crimes against specific people. Sir, called Sora from the communication station, we're getting a priority transmission from Earth Command. Han Sol walked to the command center where his team was assembled. Dr. Yuna looked up from her biological research. Taemin paused in his analysis of Vorthak military communications. They all looked older than their years, marked by the things they had seen and done. Put it through, Han Sol said. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but determined. Commander Kim, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth Command. I'm transmitting new intelligence on Vorthak operations and offering official support for your mission. The team looked at each other in surprise. For over a year, Earth Command had condemned their actions. Now they were offering help. What kind of support? Han Sol asked. intelligence sharing, equipment, safe harbor at designated facilities. In exchange, we need your help with a larger operation. What operation? The Vorthak biological weapons program is supported by 3 other alien species. The Kelthani provide the delivery systems. The Morvek provide the genetic research. The Zenthari provide the testing facilities. All 4 species coordinate their activities through a joint command structure. Hansol understood immediately. You want us to eliminate the entire conspiracy? We want you to do what you do best. Send a message that crimes against humanity have consequences that extend across the galaxy. Dr. Yuna spoke up. Admiral, we're talking about operations across multiple species and dozens of star systems. We're good, but we're not that good. You won't be working alone. The new Busan survivors have inspired similar groups across human space. We're organizing them into a single command structure. You'll be the senior field unit. How many people are we talking about? Taemin asked. Currently, over 3,000 human civilians have volunteered for retribution operations. Former military, colonists who lost families, merchants who lost ships, people who want to make sure that what happened to New Busan never happens again. Han Sol looked at his team. 3,000 people. It was enough to carry out simultaneous operations across multiple sectors. It was enough to hurt their enemies in ways that mattered. What do you call this organization? He asked. Retribution Corps. Independent military authority with a single mission. Ensure that genocide against humans is answered with complete elimination of everyone responsible. And our operational authority? Unlimited. As long as your targets were involved in crimes against human populations, you have authorization to use whatever methods prove most effective. Han Sol thought about Mira and the wheat fields of New Busan. He thought about the 2 million people who had died in agony while alien scientists took notes. He thought about the 43 human worlds that were still on the Vorthak target list. We accept, he said. Good. Captain Seo, your ship is being redesignated as Retribution Corps Command Vessel 1. You'll receive upgrades to your weapons and defensive systems, plus a larger crew complement. Captain Dong-ho smiled grimly. About time someone gave us the tools to do this job properly. One more thing, Admiral Chen said. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity has changed, that we're no longer the peaceful farmers and traders they thought we were. Every operation you conduct should send that message clearly. What message exactly? Han Sol asked. That humans remember they're dead. That crimes against us will be answered, no matter how long it takes or how far we have to travel. That some actions have consequences that last forever. The transmission ended. The soul's pride sat in empty space, but it was no longer alone. Across human space, 3,000 volunteers were preparing for missions that would teach the galaxy, a lesson it would never forget. Dr. Yuna looked at her biological weapons research. You know what this means, don't you? We're not just hunting individual criminals anymore. We're waging war against entire species. Good, Han Sol said, because that's exactly what they did to us. He activated the ship's communication system and sent a message to Retribution Corps units across the galaxy. Begin operations. Make sure they understand that murdered was never sufficient to describe what they did to our families. The hunt was about to become something much larger. 2 years had passed since the last human colony died screaming under alien biological weapons. Han Sol Kim stood before a gathering of military commanders and civilian leaders in the Great Assembly Hall on Earth. His uniform bore no rank insignia, no national symbols, no decorations for valor. Just a single patch. a wheat stalk crossed with a dagger, the symbol of the Retribution Corps. The audience was silent as he approached the podium. These were people who commanded fleets and governed worlds, but they listened to Han Solo because everyone knew what he and his people had accomplished. The galaxy was a different place now, and humans were the reason why. 2 years ago, my daughter Mira died in a wheat field on New Busan, Han Solo began. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room could hear the steel underneath. She died, slowly, in agony, while alien scientists recorded her suffering for their research. 2 million other people died with her, all of them tortured to death for the advancement of science. He paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. Admirals who had once condemned his methods, politicians who had called him a terrorist, civilians who had demanded he be arrested for his crimes against galactic law. The aliens who did this had a word for what happened on New Busan. They called it murder, simple murder, as if killing 2 million people was no different from killing one, as if torture was just an efficient method of execution. Han Solo activated a holographic display that showed the current political map of local space. Large sections that had once been marked as hostile alien territory were now colored gray, neutral, empty. We taught them that some acts require a different word. When you torture entire populations to death for scientific data, when you plan genocide as a casual military operation, when you think humans make good victims because we seem peaceful and weak, that's not murder. That's something that demands to be killed, slaughtered, eliminated so completely that the very memory serves as a warning. The display showed casualty reports from the past 2 years. The Vorthak Dominion had collapsed after losing its entire military command structure. The Kelthani Republic had surrendered after their government was eliminated in a single night. The Morvek Confederation had fragmented into dozens of small states, none of which wanted anything to do with biological weapons research. The Zenthari Empire still existed, but only because they had publicly executed everyone who had participated in the anti-human conspiracy and paid massive reparations to human colonies. Some of you have asked whether our methods were necessary, Han Solo continued, whether we went too far in our response to what happened on New Busan and the other colonies. Let me answer that question with numbers. New statistics appeared on the display. In the 2 years before the Retribution Corps began operations, alien forces killed over 15 million human civilians using biological weapons. In the 2 years since we began systematic retaliation, the number of humans killed by biological weapons is 0. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew the numbers, but hearing them stated so clearly made the implications unavoidable. We didn't stop the killing through diplomacy or negotiation or appeals to universal morality. We stopped it by making the cost of attacking humans greater than any possible benefit. We made it clear that genocide against our species would result in the complete elimination of everyone involved, using whatever methods proved most effective. Dr. Yuna Park entered from a side door and took her place at a second podium. She looked different now. Her hair was completely gray, and her eyes held knowledge that no medical professional should ever acquire. But she remained one of the most brilliant scientists in human space. The biological weapons we developed during the campaign have been cataloged and stored, she said. Species-specific agents that can eliminate entire populations while leaving their worlds habitable for human colonization. Psychological warfare techniques that can drive enemy leadership to suicide or madness. Genetic markers that allow us to track and eliminate specific family lines across multiple generations. She paused, letting the implications sink in. We don't use these weapons casually, but we maintain them as a permanent reminder that humanity possesses the knowledge and capability to inflict precise, targeted genocide against any species that threatens us. "That's barbaric," called out Council Member Harrison from the civilian section. "We're talking about the systematic extermination of entire populations." Hansol looked at the man who had once demanded his arrest. "Yes, we are, just like they systematically exterminated our populations. The only difference is that we're better at it than they were." "But we're supposed to be better than them," Harrison protested. "More civilized, more humane." "Councilman Harrison, how many of your family members died on New Busan?" Han Sol asked quietly. "None, but that's not the point." "That's exactly the point. Your family is alive because other people's families died. And now, because of what the Retribution Corps accomplished, your children will grow up in a galaxy where aliens think twice before targeting human civilians." Elder Jin Woo Nam entered the hall, moving slowly but with dignity. At 82 years old, he was one of the few surviving founders of New Busan. He had watched his life's work burn under alien weapons, and he had helped plan the retaliation that followed. "I want to read something," he said as he approached the podium. His voice was quiet, but the hall's acoustic system carried it to every corner. "These are the names of the children who died in New Busan's primary school. I memorized them all." For the next 10 minutes, Elder Jinwoo read names. Children aged 5 to 15 who had died in agony while alien scientists recorded their suffering. The hall was completely silent except for his voice, listing name after name after name. 437 children, he said, when he finished. They died for science. Their pain was considered valuable data. Their deaths were called educational experiences. He looked out at the audience with eyes that had seen too much. "Some of you think we went too far in our response. Some of you think we became monsters. Let me tell you what I think. I think we became exactly what we needed to become to make sure this never happens again." Taemin Lee took the podium next. His prosthetic arm gleamed under the lights, a permanent reminder of the price they had all paid. "The Retribution Corps now operates in 47 star systems," he said. "We maintain permanent bases on 12 worlds and have agreements with 36 human colonies to provide security services. Our intelligence network spans 4 sectors of the galaxy." "What kind of security services?" asked Admiral Rodriguez. "The kind that ensures crimes against human populations are answered immediately and completely. If aliens attack a human colony, we identify everyone responsible and eliminate them. If alien governments approve genocidal policies against humans, we eliminate the governments. If alien species develop biological weapons intended for use against humans, we eliminate the species." "That's not security," said Council Member Harrison. "That's a protection racket." Han Sol smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Councilman, a protection racket is when criminals threaten violence unless you pay them money. What we offer is simpler. We guarantee that anyone who harms human civilians will die. We don't ask for payment. We don't negotiate terms. We just make sure that certain actions have certain consequences." "And if you're wrong?" Harrison asked. "If you eliminate innocent people?" "Then they die," Dr. Yuna said simply. "Just like innocent humans died on New Busan and Haven's Rest and 38 other colonies. The difference is that when we make mistakes, other species learn to avoid actions that might be mistaken for genocide." The session continued for hours. Military officers asked about operational procedures and resource allocation. Civilian leaders asked about oversight and accountability. Colony representatives asked about protection for their worlds. But the real question, the one that everyone understood but nobody wanted to ask directly, was simple. Had humanity become something monstrous in order to survive? Han Sol answered it anyway. "We are not the same humans who tended farms on New Busan," he said. "We are not the peaceful traders and explorers who first spread across the galaxy. We are what necessity made us. We are what we had to become to ensure our children have a future." He activated one final display, showing population statistics across human space. Despite 2 years of intensive warfare, human population was growing. New colonies were being established. Children were being born into a galaxy where aliens feared to harm them. The phrase, "killed, slaughtered," has entered galactic discourse, he said. When aliens discuss humans now, they don't talk about our farming techniques or our trade policies. They talk about what happens to species that try to exterminate us. They understand that some crimes create their own punishments. Elder Jin Wu returned to the podium for the final words. "Today we dedicate the New Busan Memorial," he said. "Engraved on its walls are the names of every person who died in the biological attacks. But underneath the memorial is something else. A vault containing detailed response plans for future genocidal threats. Biological and psychological profiles of every known hostile species. Weapons and techniques that can eliminate entire civilizations if necessary." He paused, looking out at the audience with tired eyes that had seen the birth and death of worlds. "My great-granddaughter was born last month on the colony world of New Hope. She will grow up in a galaxy where aliens know that humans remember their dead, where crimes against our people have consequences that last forever, where the phrase, 'killed, slaughtered,' means something more than words. She will never know the fear we knew. She will never wonder if her family might die in agony for someone else's scientific advancement. She will live free because other people paid the price for that freedom." The assembly ended in silence. Outside, construction crews were putting the finishing touches on the New Busan Memorial. The names of the dead were carved in stone that would last for millennia, but the real memorial was not made of stone. The real memorial was a galaxy where aliens thought twice before harming humans, where genocide against humanity was no longer seen as a viable military strategy, where the weak had become strong enough to protect themselves and their children. Han Sol Kim walked through the streets of Earth's capital, past monuments to humanity's achievements and memorials to humanity's losses. He was 53 years old and looked 70. The cost of becoming what he had become was written on his face and in his scarred hands. But when he passed a playground where human children played under an open sky, he knew the cost had been worth paying. These children would grow up free, because someone had taught the galaxy that humans were no longer easy prey. They were something much more dangerous than that. They were survivors who had learned to bite back,